it's not about more treatable or less treatable. It's just about being honest and letting it all happen. Like, I really had to let myself have all the experiences because I felt like, especially from a medical standpoint, people were like, "No, it's fine, you're treatable." So I had to be the one to be like, "Okay, hold space for yourself, girl," you know?
Yes. My mom has stage 4 cancer in her bones and in her breast. My dad's disease was 15 years, he died of ALS. I made a podcast about death, seemed like the thing to do. And if you're sad by all of this, well, you're gonna die too. Oh, hey, it's Chelsea. Happy Queen's Day to you. Okay, there's a lot going on, so jumping right to it. I'm going to Austin tomorrow for the Austin Film Festival, and I'm really looking forward to it. I've heard good things. I've had friends from LA go before, and they say it's worth it. Some festivals, you know, you learn something every time, but some are just kind of like not, for lack of better words. This one has panels, it has parties, it has gatherings grouped by theme, and some of the content I've been seeing the trailers for looks really promising. So I'm in a short called Plant Moms. Can't talk right now. I'm doing plant girl shit. I play this annoying plant-obsessed plant president because, obviously, I filmed it in New York last year. I haven't seen it yet, and this will be my first time seeing it, and on the big screen, no less. So that's pretty fun. I'm trying to stay busy because I'm going through a breakup and it's sad, okay? And not just the grief that comes with thinking about your future, but just having that day-to-day person to vent to talk to. So I'm staying pretty busy. I just went to 2 weddings back to back in Big Sky, Montana and Maui, Hawaii. Poor me, right? It was really, really cool. My friends Jamie and Demi were getting married. I was obsessed. I've never been to Montana. I mean, I learned so much. I took a picture with a hat, and that's really all you need to know. I have been to Hawaii, but who doesn't love Hawaii? I mean, Hawaii is one of my favorite places on earth because you really can't have a bad time. I also like that there's not a lot of pressure, like when you go to Europe, to see the things and the museums. Although I'm obsessed with Europe and seeing museums, it's just nice to have a full vacation where you just can relax on the beach. It was also overwhelming because the last time I was in Hawaii was last year with my partner, double dating the couple who is now married. So it was a process. It was allowing myself to go to the bathroom and cry, come back out and dance, go back and cry, eat some food. I do feel like one takeaway was like my funny self came out. I was like, haha, I'm single, I'm funny, blah, 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 blah. Like kind of like my high school self, but like older and hopefully less creepy and hopefully with more brushed hairs because I didn't know how to brush my hair in high school. You feel me? So that's where I just was. Back to Austin tomorrow. But enough about me. I'm excited to jump into this episode. It is still October. It is still Breast Cancer Awareness Month. This is your reminder to complete a self-breast exam, do a self-check, look in the mirror, feel your breasts. Remember that lumps are not the only thing to look for. And go ahead and make that doctor's appointment or that gynecologist appointment that you've been putting off. Your internist, your doctor, your gynecologist, all of these people can feel your breasts for you. Just ask. Hopefully they volunteer that they can do that. If not, just ask. I did not go hard with breast cancer episodes for Breast Cancer Awareness Month this year. I did so last year, so I have a lot of breast cancer content. I highly recommend checking out the episode with Erica Silver, the genetics counselor, to see if testing for the breast cancer gene is right for you. Now, today we're talking to my girl, Kyla. I am thrilled to have had her on. She's so insightful. We first connected as we were both involved with Jewish Women's Theater. I was on the behind the scenes producing team the year that she was performing. I've since performed with Jewish Women's Theater many times, including earlier this year in 2022, where I performed my original piece, How TikTok Brought Me Closer to a Grieving Child, which was actually just published this week in Lilith magazine. Kyla, what's so amazing about her is she has this really insightful perspective on her life as an artist, but also as someone who was diagnosed with cancer in 2020. This impacted her voice, which is such a powerful instrument as an artist and as a human being. So if you want to learn more about her story, this is the episode for you. It's a feel-good episode. And while it was and is painful for Kyla, she has found the silver lining. It's just a really beautiful story. So Kyla, thank you for your time. I can't wait to share your story. So let's do this. Kyla, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to speak with you. I feel like we have crossed paths in several ways over the years and yet not. And I'm really excited to really go there and learn more about you and what you've been through in the last couple of years. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Kyla, one question I ask my guests right off the bat is about your goldfish moment. And this is the first time that you've thought about or conceptualized death in some way. For some people, it was a goldfish. Is there a moment in your early childhood that comes to mind when I say that? Goldfish moment. Did your goldfish die? Goldfish moment. Did it make you cry?
It's really interesting because I think it actually was a goldfish.
Yes.
Like, what are the actual chances? But I mean, I was really lucky as a kid to not have faced much death in my immediate circles. You know, I had very alive and healthy and present grandparents at the time. And so I think maybe it was a goldfish. And I remember it was my brother's goldfish. His name was Fred. And he had a little bowl next to like the living room, which was right off the dining room. And I remember one night right before dinner, we saw Fred sort of like teetering, like he wasn't quite fully floating, but he was just sort of teetering. And we were like, something's off with Fred. And by the end of dinner, like he was fully floating. And that is probably the first time I was like, oh yeah, that's that thing that was there earlier today is no longer there.
Oh my gosh, I love that it was a goldfish. I mean, I don't love R.I.P. Fred. However,
yeah, he's doing great.
He's doing great wherever he is. Fred,
Yes.
what's up? Is he in the ocean? I don't know. However, I thought when I started this podcast, there was going to be a lot of goldfish. I literally named it Goldfish Moment. I was like, I just feel like fish is the thing. There's been maybe, I want to say one or possibly two other people total in 2 years who their goldfish moment was a fish. So
I completely lied to you. We need to go back and do this question again.
Okay. Oh my gosh. No, we love the lies. See, I was like so excited for a few minutes and now
it's similar. It's not a goldfish, but it's similar.
Okay. I'm ready. What is the story? Let's redo this.
Okay. So I was in kindergarten. And I don't know if you had this, but in elementary school, we had, well, actually, probably specifically in kindergarten only, we had class pets.
Yes.
Like we had like a gerbil and like a couple of fish. And it, I guess, was supposed to teach us about responsibility because each, for breaks, different breaks, like a kid would be assigned to take the pet home and take care of them. And so it was my turn. I think it was like a Thanksgiving break or something. My mom and I took the cage there were two birds, and it was really cold out. And so we covered the cage with a blanket, got in a cab. I grew up in New York, got in a cab and got back to my apartment. And by the time we took the blanket off, one of them had already dropped dead. And
oh man,
I was mortified. Like, literally just left the classroom, already killed a bird, didn't even get him home before he was dead. And I was like so stressed out. I guess my dad came home and flushed him down the toilet, which is wild to think about in retrospect.
A bird went down there. Oh my goodness.
Right? And so couldn't sleep all night, woke up or got out of bed really early the next morning, and the other one had keeled over and died. And in my head, they were husband and wife. And so the husband died because he was depressed that his wife had passed away.
They were notebook birds.
Exactly. I was way ahead of my time.
Yeah, you really were. You really were.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I left kindergarten with 2 birds, came back like 4 days later with 0 birds. And that was traumatic. I got to say, it still comes up in my family.
Okay, was it because it was so cold, or was this an unknown cause times 2? Or we'll never know. We
didn't do an autopsy, so I cannot tell you for sure. But the first one in my head was the cold. Second one was depression. We'll never know. Okay. But that's how I justify it.
or the first one was so cold they were depressed. So maybe they both had coldness and depression. That actually is really rough that it was the class pet, because I feel like all the kids are like, what happened to the birds? And then the teacher has to be like, let's discuss this. Was there a discussion that you remember?
Oh God, I don't remember it. I blocked it out. It was so traumatic. I remember just being mortified walking back into that classroom, like ashamed, like I had done something completely wrong and let everyone down.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
haven't really had a pet since.
You're like, I have not had a good experience with pets and it will remain that way. Look, okay, it's interesting to reflect now that we're adults and teachers can be our age. I really wonder what that conversation was like with one of your parents and the teacher. Like, was the teacher very receptive and just, very understanding? Was the teacher really upset inappropriately? Like, I wonder what that looked like.
I know, I know. I wish I remembered more clearly. I can probably ask my parents, but
Tell us everything.
yes, yes, I'll get back to
Stay
you.
tuned. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Glad we're finding some levity in this sad bird moment. But I just think I think it's so interesting. People's first moments, they're either like hilarious, they're very bizarre, or like on occasion really not funny at all. And it's always interesting either way. Kyla, can you share a little bit more about your upbringing with our listeners? Can you paint the picture as to where you grew up, who you grew up with? You already said New York, but we love specifics over here. Tell us everything.
Yeah. So I grew up in New York City, like Upper West Side, Manhattan, born and
Bless.
raised. Yeah. It's funny because I say Upper West Side and now it's like the ideal spot, but it was like still turning over that area. Like I was like upper like 97th Street, which was when my parents bought a place there, everyone was like, "You sure?" And now it's like the most sought after neighborhood. But I grew up in a two-bedroom New York City apartment. It was me and my parents for a while until I was about 6, and then they told me they were having another child, and I lost it. Like, I was miserable, but we love him now. His
Yeah.
name is Noah. He's almost 7 years younger than me, and so we shared a room growing up,
Wow.
which was very interesting because we were so different in age.
Right. That is
Yeah.
interesting. What was that like?
I think it was hard for him. I mean, it was hard for me, but it was hard for him, especially as a kid, because I would be a teenager, trying to get ready for school, which means I would try it on my entire closet before deciding. And I would kick him out of the room. He would not be allowed in. He'd be like, Kyla, can you slide my Game Boy under the door? Like, poor child, but
I
it
love that
was
he was
fine.
kicked out of his own room. Epic. I love and appreciate the uniqueness of sibling dynamics. Also, shout out to New York City. I don't think I knew you were from there. So, love that. My parents are both from New York. My sister lives in New York. I actually was named after New York. I personally have never lived in New York, but I'm Chelsea after Chelsea. So, yay.
Love it.
Love it. I know it's not that cool because I've never lived. Everyone's like, oh, so you, I'm like, well, I haven't, but
But your
connected.
spirit has.
Yes. Do you work out of New York? Out of curiosity, do you ever fly out there to do stuff, or would you, or do you want to?
I haven't since I moved. I mean, I was in New York for a while after college, so I was back doing theater and stuff like that, but I haven't flown back for work since, but yeah, I would for sure be open to it.
At some point, I'm sure. Add it to the list. It's a weird time to be like flying around for local hire stuff, kind of at this point.
Correct, yeah.
But then you'll just have something that they'll fly you, and then you'll know it's the time the flight is being offered. I would love to hear more about your journey with cancer. If you don't mind walking us through the timeline of your diagnosis and whatever you're comfortable sharing with as to how you're doing today. I know many artists struggle in their personal lives in X, Y, or Z ways, but I would say nothing is as important as discussing situations like this. So I would love to hear the beginning of your story through now.
So, back in November 2018, I had started to feel like, right under your chin where when you get sick, you have swollen glands.
Mm-hmm.
I had started to feel those, like they were protruding like I was sick, but they were lasting for longer than I thought was normal. So I went to the doctor. I checked just to make sure that she didn't feel anything weird. And she, felt them and said they feel like normal swollen glands. I'm sure they'll go down in some time. And I think she could see the look on my face that I wasn't quite certain about that. So she said, I can order you an ultrasound just to be sure if you want. And I almost said no. I almost was like, you know what? You're probably right. I'm sure it's fine. But I said yes. And so this ultrasound was of my whole neck, and the lymph nodes that I was feeling were normal. There was nothing wrong with them. But they did my thyroid at the time. And so they saw that there were 2 nodules on my thyroid. They were very small. They were too small to biopsy at the time. They have to be at least a centimeter in order to be able to biopsy them, and they were both under a centimeter. So I was told that thyroid nodules are very common. Most of them are benign. Don't worry about them. We'll monitor them once a year, see if they grow. And so I sort of went about my business and trusted that. And my mom actually has thyroid nodules and she's lived with them for several years. They've always been benign. And so I really did trust that, like, that is, I trusted that was the truth. So about a year later, I got an ultrasound and one of them had pretty much doubled in size and it started looking concerning. It had characteristics that were abnormal. So they did a biopsy. And on February 5th, 2020, 4 days before my 1-year wedding anniversary and 5 weeks before COVID or whatever that was, I got the news that it was cancer. So I was diagnosed with papillary thyroid cancer, which is the most common. I think there are 3 types of thyroid cancer, and papillary is the most common, and it is very treatable. So it being treatable, one of the things that my endocrinologist said, well, and that several doctors at the time said to me was that, like, this is the good cancer. If there's any cancer to have, it's this. And from the outset, there was already this sort of sense that, like, everything that I was experiencing and the fear wrapped up in you have cancer was sort of minimized because I kept hearing it's the easy cancer, it's the good cancer. And so I kind of already felt dismissed, you know? So that was how I found out.
Thank you for sharing and walking us through that, and imagining starting 2020 with this incredibly difficult news, in addition to the rest of the world suffering in various ways, I imagine would be extremely complicated. I'm sure you have a lot to say there. Can you walk us through your year of 2020? What did that look like? Did you choose to communicate the news to others at that time? How did you feel?
I was in touch with a few people at the time who knew that I was going through the ultrasound, the biopsy, and all that. So I filled some people in, but I pretty quickly found it exhausting to because I was already, I was dealing with, like, the oh shit of how do I treat this? And I'm constantly, like, going to different appointments, speaking with different surgeons, different doctors, talking about different options, which is so much in and of itself, and then explaining the story over and over again to friends just became way too much for me to handle. So I actually ended up designating a friend to be like, "Can you fill in these people?" I can't keep recycling this story and opening this wound over and over again when I already had so much stress. So that was a good move on my part in that moment. But yeah, I mean, it was hard. I didn't post it publicly, so generally only people that I was in communication with knew, and that also felt heavy because I felt like my world had flipped upside down, but not a lot of people knew that it had, and so interacting with people that didn't know what was going on felt like I was carrying this huge load just on my own.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really hard to walk through the world with all of that. And yet I understand and respect why it would be. I mean, it's exhausting to repeat yourself about anything. Like if you have to tell people 17 times that you made a lemon meringue pie, that's probably exhausting. And then this is 10 million times more important than a lemon meringue pie. So then when you went through 2020, what was the most difficult part of your journey? And what has been the most surprising or uplifting part of your journey, if applicable?
Okay, so I'll start with the broad strokes of sort of how the journey went, which was that first month of post-diagnosis was, like I said, just so many appointments and different meeting with different surgeons. There were 2 options presented to me for surgery at the time, and there was no clear-cut path. It was up to me to choose which surgery I wanted, which felt like unbelievable pressure. I was like, I have my degree in musical theater. You guys are supposed to tell me what to do. I'm supposed to figure this out. It felt so unfair on top of everything that I had to decide what cancer surgery that would affect the rest of my life, like what I was going to do. It just felt nuts. So,
Are you comfortable sharing what the differences looked like in the two options?
yeah, so traditionally it's either a full thyroidectomy, which is they remove your entire thyroid gland, or because the nodule was on one side of my thyroid. Thyroid is just it's like a butterfly-shaped gland. So you can sort of remove half of it and hopefully the other side still functions. So the other thought was, let's remove half of it. Hopefully the other half of the thyroid will sort of hold its weight and produce enough thyroid hormone for your body to not be on medication. And hopefully, there will be no recurrence on that other half. But I had gotten very mixed opinions on which was best for my case, and no one was able to give me an answer. So
Wow.
I ended up going with the full thyroidectomy, which was a really hard decision because it also meant that I'd be dependent on medication for the rest of my life. And I had never really taken medication aside from like antibiotics when I have an ear infection or, I barely even took vitamins. So it just felt like a huge life shift to commit to. And I had read a lot of horror stories about people really never feeling like themselves again after removing their thyroid. So I was operating from a lot of fear. But anyway, the first month was like going to all of these surgeons and trying to figure out what was best. And then lockdown hit. And being in a hospital was the worst place to be. And so it was like just as I was getting to the point of being like, okay, I'm going to make a decision about surgery. I'll choose it. I'll go into surgery. It immediately was like, oh, no, that's not safe. I felt so unsafe with the idea of going into a hospital. So I ended up delaying surgery until June when things looked a little bit. We just got a handle on like what this
Right.
whole COVID thing was for a bit, and just a sense of, okay, this is what it is. This is what it isn't. And I used that time to, I don't know, kind of get centered again because I had been operating from a place of so much panic and fear and anxiety from the diagnosis that I just used the time to do a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation, a lot of like chanting and health, like I cut out I cut out alcohol, caffeine, sugar. I was just like really, really, I had my own little like retreat center happening in my apartment. And so we did another ultrasound as it got closer to the surgery just to make sure that nothing had changed, but nothing had changed. So we ended up going with the full thyroidectomy. So that was June 2020. And then right after that, I couldn't speak at all, like, could not make a sound. And it turned out I had actually probably still have a paralyzed vocal cord. It's a rare side effect, I guess, from the surgery, but usually when it happens, it's because a vocal cord is injured during the surgery. And being an actor, my surgeon knew, like, this is very important to me, my voice is everything. So he when I woke up from the surgery, said, "Your cords were monitored, your nerves were able to be stimulated, they're all good, you should have no issues." And the next day I woke up and couldn't speak, and I couldn't speak for 6 weeks, and they had no idea why. Last time I was checked was about a year ago, and it was still paralyzed at the time, so thank God I can speak. I don't know how, like, just suddenly the other one, I guess, just learned how to compensate, but as of last time I checked, Lefty was just, like, not moving at all. So that was its own whole journey, which was terrifying as an actor, and as a person, it was so lonely, like, all I wanted to do was be able to speak with people. I couldn't see anyone because of COVID during my recovery. I was literally alone in my body. I couldn't communicate. So that was probably one of the hardest parts of the journey, and an unexpected part.
That is, I can't, I mean, okay, I was going to say I have no words, but that would not be the right thing to say.
Oh, it is perfectly appropriate. It is the exact right thing to say.
For this podcast, I think so. But I really don't. I mean, that's so unimaginable, right? Because I would say most people have never had that experience, right? So just even thinking about that, like you're saying, as an artist, as a human being, and not knowing if it would come back. And even if some doctor somewhere was like, we're going to get it back, it's like, no, until it's back. I imagine that would be so upsetting.
Yeah.
Did you email and text with people and texting your family? And what did your communication look like?
Yeah, I mean, it was text. I was FaceTiming with my parents, but I mean, I was not able to speak. Aaron, my husband, would have to sit next to me and like communicate for me. Like I would say something and they would not be able to hear, and so he'd translate. I mean, he was truly I call like a service animal, but like a service human. But he was my voice because we would go out into the world and we were all wearing masks. So no one could even read my lips. Like
Oh,
he literally had to be my voice. I was so dependent on him. I mean, thank God for him, but it was also like I lost a big part of my autonomy in that period, you know?
I am so glad to hear that it came back. And yet, what an incredibly unique and bizarre experience to have had lost your actual voice. I mean, as an artist, I'm wondering, for the artistic people listening, I wonder, how did you choose to communicate with representation at that time? I feel like a lot less happening in the business, fortunately. However, what did that look like? Did you choose to tell them, hey, I can't do a tape, etc.? And how were their responses? I hope they were kind, but I wonder what that looked like.
Luckily, it was still in the middle of
Right.
when everything was like not happening.
Right.
Because honestly, I mean, if it was in the middle of normal times, I would have been out for like 2 months, you know? So I was lucky that COVID coincided with it in that way. But I told them. I mean, they were very informed as to what was going on because it was so uncertain. I couldn't lie about it. There was no other option.
Right. No, I'm
Yeah.
glad that, yes, I mean, it's like not the most important thing here, of course, by any means, but it is just interesting. You know, as artists, perhaps we're not as personal with people we're communicating with in business situations, and yet we are the product. This is personal. Our business is personal. So being open and honest is the only way through.
Yeah, for sure.
What has been your experience through the rest of 2020 and 2021? How have you been healing emotionally and physically?
2020 was really hard. And I know I'm not alone when I say that. I mean, that was just the collective experience. But I think I definitely had an added layer, you know? I mean,
Yes.
it was amidst all the mayhem that the world was feeling, I was feeling my own personal world of mayhem. And I think that was really challenging because, again, it just felt like another layer of isolation. Like everyone's having their own experience, and here I am having a separate one when everyone else's seems to be more collective, you know? So 2020 was really hard. 2021, well, and I guess I'll just say the testing post-surgery was I still to this day don't have any real sense of cancer-free or not. There's been no declaration of anything. And for a while, I felt like every time something came up, there was another curveball. So one of the main reasons I got the full thyroidectomy was your thyroid. This is such scientific, boring stuff, but your thyroid produces thyroglobulin, which is a protein. And when you don't have a thyroid, your thyroglobulin levels should be 0 or close to 0. But if it starts to creep up, it could mean that there are thyroid cells that are producing or reproducing, so that it could be a sign that there's a recurrence. And so when you don't have a thyroid, it's a lot easier to monitor, like recurrence or anything, because that test is so sensitive. And so that was one of the main reasons that I chose to go with the thyroidectomy. Was like, okay, I'll be monitored for recurrence purposes. This is going to be a lot easier and more sensitive of a test. And you have to wait 3 months post-surgery to do that first thyroglobulin test. And we were sort of like aiming to, I don't know, we were aiming for that 3-month check-in as a barometer of like, am I okay? What's happening? Do we need to do more treatment? Do we not? And it came back that my thyroglobulin levels were at a certain place, but then I also had thyroglobulin antibodies, which threw a curveball in the whole thing. And it just means, really, essentially what it means is that we can't trust the thyroglobulin levels the way they thought they could. And so it felt like, oh my God, I went through this whole thing for the reason of being able to trust this as a marker. And now you're saying we can't trust this? Like, I felt like every time I did a test, there was another curveball, another wrench thrown in, and it just felt like a rolling slew of uncertainty. So 2020 was that. I just felt like I was being hit with like uncertainty after uncertainty. 2021, I think I got a little more of a handle on it. Just, I don't know. I had a therapist who said, she was like, right now, the situation, the grief, all of it feels like the center point of your life. And it's not that that center point is ever going to shrink. It's just that your life will fill in around it. So that was sort of what 2021 was about for me. It was like life started to fill in around this again. And it just became, okay, my health isn't the only thing I'm thinking about all the time. Life happened, and that was really important. I started to feel a little bit more like myself again.
That's really good to hear. I love therapist analogies. They're
Oh, yeah.
always the best. So even when you're saying that, when I'm like, yes, I'm imagining the graph and the hole and the dots and the things filling it, even though if she didn't have a graph, I'm now imagining one. So
Yeah.
that's a really good point.
It's like I saw sort of a visual on it about it on Instagram, which was, it was like a mason jar with a big ball in it, like a smaller mason
Oh, this
jar
is
with a
my favorite
big,
thing ever. I know
right?
this.
You've seen
Tell
it?
tell
Yeah.
us about it. I'm obsessed with this.
Well, it's the same thing, right? Where it's like the grief is the ball inside the smaller mason jar, and then the ball doesn't get any smaller, but the jar gets bigger. Like the mason jar gets bigger. And that's sort of how I feel with my life. It's like, oh yeah, my life expands again. And it's not that my journey means any less or is any different or easier. It's just that it's not the only thing anymore.
Well, I'm really, really glad to hear that. It's like you said, it's such a huge part of your life, and getting to do other things is wonderful. What do you wish other people knew about having cancer? What do you feel that the biggest misconceptions are about having cancer?
Well, I guess the first one would be there is no good cancer. um, I mean, I think thyroid cancer, and I'm sure a few other cancers that are more treatable, I think more treatable gets conflated with good. And I understand that because I understand that a lot of cancers are more high stakes, right? Like things are more dire for other types of cancers. But I think it's really risky to minimize someone's experience. And a lot of times I felt unsure of what to do with what I was experiencing because outwardly, yeah, well, especially like with thyroid cancer, you don't go through chemo. So outwardly, your appearance doesn't change. People don't really understand the full scope of the emotional journey, of even the physical journey, all of it. I guess I just would say for someone who's going through it, just really be accepting of your journey is completely your own. And it's not about more treatable or less treatable. It's just about being honest and letting it all happen. Like, I really had to let myself have all the experiences because I felt like especially from a medical standpoint, people were like, no, it's fine. You're treatable. So I had to be the one to be like, okay, hold space for yourself, girl, you know?
Yes. I'm really glad that you said that because that's so interesting just to think about everyone being like, but this is good. Like doctors are excited because they know what to do, but you're not excited whether or not they know what to do. It's like, okay, but this is happening. I mean, I'm offended when people tell me I'm a great candidate for laser hair removal, and that's nothing to do with what we're doing. I'm like, really? But I still have to put needles inside of my skin and radiate them. So I'm offended, but I'm joking. It's nothing to do with this, but I'm like, yeah. So this times a million, you're like, excuse me, I have cancer. So I'm glad you're holding that space for yourself and giving others permission to do so as well. You mentioned speaking with your therapist. Did you seek out therapy at the time of your diagnosis? Were there new things that you decided to add into your routine in order to express yourself at this time?
So at the beginning of the diagnosis, I mean, when it coincided with lockdown and everyone self-isolating, that was really when I went full into like, this is my wellness retreat. And so I was like on a
Yes.
regimen. I did Ayurveda. And so I had like a whole food and tea and herb medicine wellness regimen. And I was doing yoga and meditation and chanting. And chanting was something I had never done, but I added that into it, which was interesting. It was a different way to move the energy. And I had been with a therapist prior and then had stopped because my insurance didn't cover it anymore. And then when this happened, yes, I sought out a new therapist and was working with her all throughout, thank God, because she was with me through, lockdown and the sort of holding pattern that I was in before I went to surgery and then through surgery and then through the voice stuff. And I mean, like, she was with me for all of it. So, I mean, I'm with someone else now because my insurance has changed again, but
There you go.
but I am still committed to therapy.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Way to make it work and pivot to the new, insurance in and of itself is just exhausting. There's just so many things that can happen with that. So good for you for finding new ways through with your new therapists. So Kyla, how are you navigating this space as an artist? And I say that in a sense of, I don't think everything that we go through has to or needs to be turned into art or into something. And yet as artists, we do hold space for pain and joy and all of these emotions. I know, for instance, you have a podcast, so I'm wondering what that has looked like for you. What is coming up for you when I say this?
Well, it's interesting because I think what comes up first for me is my acting. I think what I'm finding right now is really about reclaiming my power because this whole journey has really made me question my own sense of self in a lot of ways, what I knew to be true about myself. I mean, part of what was so dizzying about the experience was I never felt, oh, those lymph nodes, they were fine. They went down on their own. Like there was never a single symptom. Even when the doctors felt my thyroid, they couldn't even feel the nodule. And so this idea that something sinister was happening inside my body and I couldn't tell was really disorienting. And I, throughout this journey, have lost a sense of my own power. And now that's what I'm focused on claiming again and finding again. And so it did affect my acting. I do feel like I felt like I was on shaky ground for a while. I couldn't really find my center. And I'm just now getting back to a place that I'm like, oh, there I am, which is obviously like how you feel affects how you show up in your work as an actor. So that's been rocky, but now I'm like, okay, yeah, all right, there we are. But my podcast as well, my friend Marianne, she has been through cancer as well. And she and I worked at a restaurant together and we had been friends more like acquaintances before, but we would have an occasional like brunch together or something, but never really hung out. And then once I got diagnosed and made it public, she and I got a lot closer. And so we decided, or she really asked me to do this podcast with her. And that's been a really important way to just be like, okay, we can use this for the good. You know, there's a lot, like I was saying, there's a lot of powerlessness that comes along with this journey. And so to be able to take back some power and pour some creative energy into it feels important.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, how did you guys first connect? Did she see your Facebook post and then reach out and say, hey, I also have cancer? Like, was she a survivor at that time? Was she combating at the time?
She had already been through cancer. She had been through her own journey with chemo and everything a few years prior. So I knew that she had been through that. But it actually, now that I'm remembering, it wasn't through a Facebook post that she found out. She had asked me, I during quarantine, my husband and I were doing these ridiculous like music video parodies just to entertain ourselves. And so she
Obsessed.
she asked if she could screen them at a festival that she was like
That's so
hosting.
cool. That's awesome.
But it was around the time that I was about to do surgery. And so I was like, I actually won't be able to be there. And this is why. And that was before I had posted anything publicly. So that was when we started to really, bond about it. And she really showed up for me. It's important. I guess going back to your question from before, that's something else I would say to people who are going through it. Find someone who you can speak to that has had a similar journey. She and I have had completely different cancers, completely different experiences, but there is a foundational understanding that is deeper than with someone who hasn't been through it. So I think that's really important. And she really knew immediately how to show up for me.
Yeah, like you're saying, that's so important for people to find someone else. And so many people do, and so many people may not. And yet, thank goodness for the internet, at least as a tool. I would hope people can seek out even someone virtually to connect with, which I know is not for everyone, or some people I can imagine would be timid in terms of sharing their story or seeking out that other person. But I hope that having listened to your story, it'll encourage someone to do just that.
Yeah.
I saw you perform in the Jewish Women's Theater. I know you did it, and then I did it the year following, and I can just imagine you so eloquently speaking on all of this, and yet that might not be of everyone's interest, or nor do you have to, but have people asked you about that? Have you thought about doing something like that?
I think I've thought about it in various ways, and I'm open to it. I don't feel ready is not the right word. I guess I don't feel like I know what I would focus on almost. There's so many elements. I think I would need to really narrow it down to one sort of experience within the whole experience that I've had. But yeah, I'm open to it. I think it's why not use what we have been through as a means of healing and community and connection?
Sure. I did this really interesting class through Writing Pad. It was a personal essay class last year, and everyone was writing like a personal story. And that's not even a performance piece, it's just to write it down. And some people want to submit it to blogs, some people don't, just want it for themselves. But I thought the teacher was incredible. She teaches twice a year. So I'll send you the info if you ever
Nice.
wanted, but no pressure, of course.
Oh, for sure.
It was really interesting, just like
Yeah,
to
and I
write
do
things
think
down.
there is something healing even about the writing of it. Honestly, like I did not expect social media to be a place that I felt expression through
Mm-hmm.
or healing through expression on social media, but I did. Even just posting the first post that I made about it felt like I had let out a secret that I was holding for so long, and just saying it and putting it out there was empowering. And being able to write about it, post about it has actually been way more cathartic than I thought it would be on, on stupid, silly platforms.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because it's like, the expression, I love it. People won't remember what you say or how you say it, but they'll remember how you make them feel. So to this day, I don't remember what your post said specifically, but I remember you doing a post and reading it and being so impacted and being like, oh my gosh, and overcome with emotion. And I can't believe that. And just having all of these powerful feelings. So thank you for sharing that. And it felt like so honest. And social media it's so crowded and convoluted with all this like crap sometimes and beautiful things. But I love that when something really, really deep and profound is there, I do feel that it finds its way, right? It's like, this was an important post and people like snap out of their mindless scrolling and like it wakes you up. It shakes you in a good way, in a way of connection, even if it's something so unfortunate. So thank you for writing that and sharing that.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. I mean, that's like, obviously it's not why I write it, but it's amazing to be like, oh yeah, this is important to someone outside of me, So thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. Kyla, what suggestions do you have for someone listening who has a friend with cancer and is perhaps hesitant to bring it up? They might feel awkward. They might feel ill-prepared. I would say there's not a right way to address this, but what do you wish people had asked you? How did you like to be approached? Is there a do or don't that comes to mind when it comes to bringing this up? Of course, it's so personal with each individual and you're not speaking for everyone, but I'd love to hear what you have to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many thoughts. We need to do another episode about this.
Okay, gotcha.
For now. No, I'm kidding. I'm only half kidding. So really, I think what you said about it's so individual is the key to this. And within that, if you're a friend that wants to show up for your friend who's going through this, make that known. Like, it's going to be different. Everyone's going to need different things, but make it known that you want to be there for your friend. And ask, how can I do that? What do you need? And some people will say, I don't know what I need. And that's fine. But continuing to show up and say, even if it's just a text saying, I'm thinking of you. I love you, here for you. Or, I'm going to bring you dinner on this day. Or, I mean, really anything that just shows like you matter. Because I think that's really what it is. It's a lonely journey. And feeling like you're on someone's mind and that not that they can relate, but that they're thinking of you. They want to be there for you. That's so important. And there's no right thing to say. I would say the only wrong thing is to ignore it. Don't pretend it's not there because it's very much real for your friend who's going through it. So be there with them. Just say, I want to be there. I want to hold space. I love you. Let me know what you need, or maybe not let me know what you need, but like, yeah, what's showing up for you. And it might change. That's the thing, is like different points of their journey, they might need different things. And so just continuing to be present with them throughout the journey.
Beautiful. I'm also a fan of, I always say, adding dates to one's calendar, because I feel that with a big monumental event, greeting card event, good or bad, everyone reaches out right away when the event happens. And how is that person, how are you feeling 1 year later, 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, on the anniversaries of whatever that might look like. So I add people's dates to my calendar when, for instance, I speak with a lot of people whose moms and dads die. And so I add that to my calendar. And then it's this like tragic but beautiful, comedic, amazing thing. My calendar is like complete self-tape, attend stand-up, open mic, text Taylor because her brother died 3 years ago on September 8th, send flowers to Alicia, whose mom died 2 years ago today. It's like, it's all in my calendar, but it's
Listen,
there.
That is some graduate school level friend shit right there. Like, yeah, I mean, here I am like, send a text. And you're like, I literally remember everyone's dates. Like, fuck yeah, that is serious friending that you're doing. That's amazing.
Well, I mean, thank you. But it's also, well, I've been in a, different situation of, talking to a lot of people about this. There's become too many dates, unfortunately. So I can't possibly remember them all at this point. Shout out to all the dead people out there. So if you don't feel bad if you're not calendaring, if you are like supporting one friend, like you don't need to like be crazy on the calendar. I don't know where I'm going with this. Okay. Do you have a book, film, or podcast that has helped you through your journey specific to cancer, or just that inspired you in a positive way through your journey?
Untamed. If you have not read Untamed,
I haven't read Untamed yet.
dude, what are we even doing here? Go read the book.
It's been on my Libby, on my public library app, and then it always takes 16 weeks to come. So the real thing I should do is just purchase it, but I keep waiting the 16 weeks and then it relapses and then I forget. But it's been on my list for like 2 years.
Well, it's no good on your list. You have to buy the book.
Okay, tell me more. Okay, tell me more.
Dude, okay. I don't even know where to start. Glennon Doyle is the most badass warrior. I truly think she's like, I mean, Glennon, if you're listening, like she has her own podcast now, like, because you said book and podcast. I'm like, yeah, all of the above. She is just this bright light of what it means to fully embrace all of your humanity and be with it. Like, not try to fix it. Not, there's so much like self-help stuff that's about like changing and fixing and becoming better. And she's kind of this beacon that's like, nope, we don't need to fix anything. We just need to like not abandon ourselves. Like, just stay with yourself. And I am obsessed with her writing. Her writing is so visceral to me. Like, I couldn't put it down. As I'm reading it, it's just like it cuts through to my gut. Read
Love that.
Untamed.
Okay, I love that. I love her, by the way. I will say I'm very familiar with her on podcasts and all the things. I know about her wife, Abby. She was a gymnast. It's great. She left her husband, the kids, that joined the family. It's like I am up on the Glennons.
Abby was a soccer player.
Oh, what did I just say?
Gymnast.
Soccer
player. She was like on the women's like USA Olympic team, I think.
Why did I say gymnast? Okay, I'm clearly up on nothing. I'm worthless, really.
Yeah, you got to read the book.
I was going to say, let's blame the fact that I've been watching Yellow Jackets, but that show's about soccer, so then I would have gotten it right. So I really have no excuse.
Are you watching Cheer?
Oh, yes. I've recently watched both Cheer and Yellow Jackets. Have you?
I love Cheer. I have not watched Yellow Jackets.
Okay, great. Curious what you think. It's a nice dark. I mean, it's real dark. People are dying, but it's all female. So we support all female, including horror and death. They all get stranded and die. And yeah, check it out. Okay.
Cool.
Was that spoilers? I don't know. Kyla, is there a fun little snack you're eating lately? Just like a fun little moment? Anything you've bought at Trader Joe's that you're just like, this is a fun time?
Okay, no, not at Trader Joe's. I actually haven't like been to the grocery store in a while. It's weird. I've gotten a lot of Instacart.
Do you Instacart? Okay.
I do Instacart, and I do we do imperfect produce as well. So we'll get whatever's, on that. I love imperfect produce.
Love that.
Great. Cut down on the food waste. But something that came in the imperfect produce it was this like, it's going to sound so LA, but it's this cashew-based cream cheese by I think the brand is called Wild, and it's really good. I feel like there's no better LA cliche than this, but I promise you, it's really good. I've never seen it in stores. It's like a blue label. I think it's called Wild. They make a sauerkraut too.
Cool.
That's what I got.
Cool. I don't think I've had cashew cream cheese, but I would love to try it. LA me up all day.
Yeah.
LA me any way you can. I'm down for an LA whatever.
Yeah.
Schmear.
I'll send you a pic. An LA schmear. Yeah.
An LA schmear. Judaism. Jewish women's leader. Okay. There were some lovely Orthodox people on the top of Runyon today, and I was hiking and I said shalom, and they were like, oh my gosh, have the best day ever. And they were so nice. And I was like, shalom. I didn't know how to say, hey, I'm also Jewish without being like offensive. Like they're probably like, okay. But I just was like, shalom. And I feel like that worked. Okay.
No, you got everything across with that one word.
Right? It's like, I didn't. Sorry, go ahead.
It means hello, goodbye, peace, and I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
I'm Jewish too.
Exactly. Like I didn't want to have like a big heart to heart. Like I was sweating, they were sweating. Like I was in a rush. I wasn't like trying to be like, how are you feeling about the entire world and like Israel and like, are you experiencing anti-Semitism in Los Angeles? Like I have a lot of questions, but like I didn't really have time for that. So it was just like, hey, shalom, shalom. So yeah, there we go.
Got it.
Anyways, shalom. Kyla, this was so lovely getting to speak with you. Where can people find you and connect with you online, and where can they listen to your podcast? I'm obsessed with the name. I'm going to let you say it because we love the name.
So my Instagram is at a Schoer thing. Schoer is my last name, but it's spelled Schoer. So it's at ASCHOERTHING. And you can stay tuned. Our podcast is not out yet, but it is on the way. And that is called Yes We Cancer. So our Instagram is at Yes We Cancer Pod.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kyla. This was, I would say, a blast, but is that what it is? I don't know. It was lovely. It was a lovely blast. Not from the past, because we haven't talked about this in the past, but it was a blast from the present.
From the present,
from the best. Yeah. I think we should go with that.
Yeah, I like it.
Yodo, you only die once. Thank you guys for listening to Kyla's story. I just have chills. It was so good getting to speak with her. And if you liked what you heard, if you could share this episode with a friend, that would mean so much. It's a really awesome way to support an independent podcaster like myself. And next week, we'll be speaking with Gianna DiMedio about starting her own grief community and losing her dad and what that's like having a husband with a dead mom and she has a dead dad and how they had a baby and navigated those spaces in between. She's also really funny, so I'm excited to share that with you next week. Okay, as always, if you want to share your story, hit me up on Instagram at DyingOfLaughterPodcast. And remember, Yodo, you only die once.